Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Gibby reps NJ. With the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? Is real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Til Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week, especially now that our hiatus is over. John Saponaro coming to you from North Hollywood, California, where it is hot and gross still, and I wish I was maybe a little bit cooler, sipping some, like, I don't know, hot apple cider or like enjoying a pumpkin picking. I don't know. It's too hot here in Southern California is the point. But my co-host, Matt Ibanez, holding things down back in New Jersey. Ibby, lot to talk about today. I think it's going to be a mixed bag in terms of where people's emotions are at. But before we get into that, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, John, but I don't know about what you were just saying. I can believe all of it because I just saw you put out a post before saying how, you know, it's all hot and nice over in, you know, that over in LA, and it's cold and it's hoodie season over here in, you know, on the East Coast. And I don't know how I feel about this when you're posting that it's 86 over there. Now you're saying you're not a big fan of it, but
I was sorry. I don't know if that came off the wrong way. I'm posting.
I think it did.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a huge fan of it right now. I would like it to be.
Okay.
I would like it to be
a note I left you. Disregard that voice note that I left you.
I was going to talk about it, but no, it's all good.
No, but all things considered, you know, weather's fine over here. It's a little bit chilly, but you know, it is what it is. It's getting colder, which means that the hot stove is going to be right around the corner in terms of heating us Mets fans up. But we still got a World Series to finish up, which, by the way, has been awesome. If you guys have been watching, it's been fantastic. If you're a baseball fan, you should be watching. The Jays are just relentless as a team. So shout out to them for the fight that they're putting up right now. But no, when it comes to this week's show, like, I know emotions are everywhere, like John just mentioned, and we're going to get into all of them. We got a bunch to get into that's on the scroll right now, including how you as a fan feel. There is a poll, I should say, on the YouTube side. Make sure you vote on it. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe as well. But I just think that this week, Mets fans went into overdrive, like really like over the top with a lot of things. We're going to get into it. And as always, it's Wednesday, the red light's on. Let's have some fun. Let's try and calm down a little bit.
Absolutely. Let's get right into the conversation. But first, a couple really fun comments. Jeff Cohen says, thumbs up already smashed. That was before we even went live. So thank you for shouting that out, Jeff. And everybody else, go do that if you haven't already. Odd Villain says, plot twist, Hector from the Heights and Joe and Clark are going to fill in today when everybody was waiting on us. And then said, with special guest Mark Healy. I actually, I like Mark Healy. So I'll just leave it at that. I'll just say that, and that's it. We have Jeff Cohen saying, John, excited by the Jets win, wearing the Jets garb. Not exactly. Armand did nail it, though, and Rael. John repping the Nick Mangold jersey, RIP. Gone too soon and too young. Rael saying Nick Mangold tribute that looks like a 74 jersey. Yes, it is. You know, don't mean to start on a somber note, but there's probably no other good time to address it. That is why I'm wearing the jersey. Obviously, Nick Mangold tragically passed away from kidney disease at the age of 41, which is just mind-blowing. Yeah, absolutely too soon. Happened on Sunday. The Jets did get a win, which I guess is nice to kind of, get that team win, that first win for Mangold. But, bigger than football, I said last week, maybe when we were joking around that like I didn't get rid of my Jet stuff, and here is case in point. I wish I didn't have to rep it like this, but Nick Mangold along with Darrelle Revis and Bart Scott are my favorite 3 Jets of all time. So I've had this Nick Mangold jersey for a very long time, and decided that even though I don't do a Jets show anymore and I don't follow the Jets the way that I did, this would be the perfect time for a lot of the people who, are like me or were like me growing up, who are Jets and Mets fans, just a terrible, terrible, terrible thing to have happen. So, just wanted to do a little thing that I could to just, I never met Nick Mangold, but by all accounts, he was a really great dude. And again, 41 is just too young. So, condolences go out to his family, his wife, his kids, just absolutely awful.
Yeah, it's a very sad thing. I was shocked when I saw. I knew that the whole kidney thing was going up, but still shocked when that comes across the ticker or across the scroll when you're on Twitter. And if there's one thing I can say, like as not a Jet fan, but like I said, I'm surrounded by a lot of Jets fans, and I'm in the area, I'm in the market to watch the Jets, and have when they were at their best, when John just mentioned the likes of Bart Scott and Nick Mangold and DeBrickashaw Ferguson and all those guys, and when they were doing some good things with Rex Ryan. And like, if there's one thing I can say, of all people, I should say of all positions, the fact that a good amount of Jets fans had the jersey of a center, I think that in itself tells the story. Now, someone can easily say, well, it's because the Jets didn't have that many good. No. The Jets had good players during his time there.
Great players.
Great players. But the fact that Nick Mangold was a jersey that people made it a point to go out and get, like I would hear constantly good things about him. Like if anyone ever asked me, like I would watch Jets games. I'm like, Nick Mangold's like a monster, like on the line. He's great. He's a great leader. Everything you heard was fantastic. And all the stories that came out this past week were awesome to hear. And it's sad that, he has gone way too soon. Seemed like he was an incredible person, incredible teammate. Brought me to tears seeing Rex Ryan say the words that he said about him.
Oh, it was such a hard watch. My God,
it was a very hard
awful.
And honestly, I felt like it was putting him in a tough spot. Like it just happened, and he's on national television. It's like, go ahead and go talk. It's like I thought it was rough, but regardless, everything he said was like I said, it was holding back tears, and unfortunate. Hate that it happened, and praying for obviously everyone of his loved ones.
Yeah. And again, not a great way to start off a Mets show. I understand that, but I knew it was going to draw some attention for sure. But you know what? That's why I wore it, because, the guy deserves, any kind of tribute that he can get, whether that is, from somebody like Rex Ryan, who knew him personally, who, like I said, it was difficult to watch, but it was very touching, or, somebody like me who just, I don't want to say grew up watching him, because Nick Mangold's was only a couple of years older than I am. But, that's my favorite era of Jets football. I didn't have a lot before that, and I certainly have not had a lot since. So, that is my favorite era. And there's a reason why Mangold and Bart Scott and Revis and those guys stand out to me. Yeah, Francine, watching Rex Ryan cry talking about Nick Mangold was heart-wrenching.
It was tough.
Jeff Cohen said, I spoke to Nick a few years ago when he started his barbecue sauce business. Nice man. No easy segue off of that, but we did bring up a couple comments already. Get back into it with the roll call. Armand is here in addition to some of those other folks. Odd Villain, Corey Holzer, Jeff Cohen, who I mentioned, Ethan KL, Rael, Clink, Francine, who we already brought up. A lot of familiar faces. A lot of expected people here so far. World Series going on. We have Cindy as well. World Series is going on right now. The offseason has not started in earnest. So, don't know where the numbers are going to be at, but as we always do, try to be the therapy session for those New York Mets fans looking for an outlet. So we got about 50 people watching right now. I'm sure that number will continue to grow, but shout out to everybody who's here in the chat. Real quick, AB, you are out next week.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Just a little housekeeping. We will do a show, or I will do a show I'm working on getting either a guest or a guest host. Ibby's going to be on vacation, much deserved vacation. So we will be here next week at 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, East Coast time, all that stuff. World Series should hopefully be wrapped up by then. And again, that point, it'll be off season in full swing. I don't want to say who I've reached out to because I've not been able to nail down either a guest or a co-host, as it were, but I am working on it. So just keep that in mind. So show will be on next week. Look a little different. It'll be me and someone else, hopefully, because it's more fun to have a little bit of a back and forth. If not, if everything falls through, it'll be me and the commenters, which is great. It's just a little hard to manage. Brad, Ibby, how dare you?
I know how
I said
dare
it was
I?
well deserved, but how dare you?
How dare I? I apologize. You can take it up with my wife. It's her plan, but you can take it up with her.
So look, we have two bits of business to discuss with the New York Mets. One has really stuck in the side of a lot of fans, and one seems to have, maybe because of the second one, gone under the radar a bit. But Ibby, with that said, I think we should start with the one that we're going to spend a little less time on, which is the Mets have named a hitting coach. It'll be the person who is working under Jeff Albert. It is Troy Snitker, who they interviewed last week. We joked and said, hey, he's probably not going to be the guy because the Mets interviewed him and they didn't hire him immediately. He's coming over from the Houston Astros. He was relieved of his duties at the end of last season. But, the Houston Astros had a really great run with him as their hitting coach, put up some gaudy offensive numbers at times. Looked like it was maybe time for a new voice there. And it is somebody who David Stearns is familiar with, and it is somebody who Jeff Albert worked with directly. So, say what you want about it. The one thing I will say is, and this is just to piggyback our conversation from last week, almost every team has two hitting coaches or two hitting voices or whatever. We talked about it with Joe DeMeo in the comments. 29 out of 30 have two voices. 16 out of the 30 have three. It's not about the number. It's about the messaging and making sure they're on the same page. Jeff Albert and Troy Snitker, for better or for worse, Ibby, will be on the same page. So as far as that's concerned, I think it's a good hire. I don't know anything about it, but it is good enough for me if you're going to have a consistent message throughout the organization.
Yeah, I had mentioned last week when the name was brought up how I had my friend who is a diehard Houston Astro fan was happy for him to be out, and I was some parts I had left out from that conversation were also the need for a change in voice. And maybe it's also because the change in talent that has gone on over the years. If there is one thing that I have dug into when it comes to Houston fans and their thoughts on him, it seems as though they felt he thrived with the stars, but when it came to developing, it wasn't that great, which as a Met fan, it's kind of difficult because we saw our stars do what they're supposed to do, in terms of the back of the baseball card, but it was the younger guys where you kind of want to get them proper. But him working with Albert, having a prior relationship, hopefully things can, properly, meld and mold together. Shout out to Carson, Mets Weekly, posting this couple days ago, talking about how the team from 19 to 25 under Snitker, when it came to runners in scoring position, they were 11th in walk rate. They had the lowest strikeout rate. They were they were tied for first in batting average. They were fifth in ISO, fifth in home runs, third in OPS, and second in weighted runs created plus. I also know that over that time frame that they were second or third best in terms of ground ball rate. And we were a team that saw, this team in general this past year was a grounded double play machine. We had the ball on the ground so much. And his numbers as a hitting coach in Houston, they lifted the ball a lot. It was part of their philosophy, which is what we've been saying for a while here on the show, and others as well speak on the need to lift the ball. So bringing in a new voice was obviously needed. You have two new ones in Albert and Snitker. You hope for the best. And again, it still comes down to the players going out there and performing. And hopefully we can further unlock some of the youth that's going to be filling out the bottom half of this lineup moving forward.
Yeah, look, I think all that's well said. I'm happy that you brought up the post from Carson. Shout out Mets Weekly, because I was going to bring that up if you didn't. And that's what I'm saying about this Astros team having some gaudy numbers while Troy Snitker was their hitting coach. And for the concern that you addressed, and I don't have any like diehard Houston Astro fan friends like you do. So it's good for you to go and kind of do a little bit of that digging that you were able to do. Even just the concern about, well, Snitker was great with the stars, but not great with the young players. Well, let's remember that Jeff Albert's going to be in uniform in dugout. And what was he lauded by the organization for? Working with the young players. So now you start to see a tandem that can really make sense, right? These guys go down to the minor leagues on rehab assignment, on whether they were optioned down like Alvarez, or they went down on rehab like Vientos, and they started to hit. And it was a credit to the guy who was running the program, which was Jeff Albert. And again, he doesn't have the title of hitting coach, but he is going to be there every day. He's going to travel with the team. He's going to be in the dugout. It's probably just, a new wave. Remember, what was it, 15 years ago or a little bit more than that? We never even heard of president of baseball ops, right? The title everybody wanted was GM. So titles change, things evolve. It's ways to give guys more clout, more money, whatever. It's also a way around certain things. Like, if you're hiring a guy, whether it's front office or a coach from another organization, you have to technically give them a promotion in order to pry them away if they're under contract. So, the creation of, the director of Major League Hitting Development or whatever Jeff Albert's title is, I know he was hired from within the organization, but when you start to look at stuff like that, the names and the titles matter. They don't matter to you or I. They shouldn't, and they shouldn't matter to anybody in the comments. They're not going to matter to the product that the team puts out offensively, but it does matter to the people in those jobs for one reason or another. But I think they have built a really smart tandem. And we'll see what the results are. Jeff Cohen saying the problem with the Mets was situational hitting. Can't disagree with that, but Ibby, I think some of the numbers that you just rattled off are going to help that. The Mets did hit so many ground balls, and that is, by and large, bad situational hitting, especially depending on who's hitting those ground balls, right? Like, you don't want Pete Alonso to hit a ground ball. Don't want you don't want Juan Soto to hit ground balls. A big part of Juan Soto not having the runners in scoring position numbers that we all wanted him to have for the entirety of the season, it was simply because he hit too many ground balls. So, it's not about hitting home runs, but it is about driving the ball. It's about lifting the ball. It's about getting sack flies. The worst thing you can do first and third, and even if you have one out, obviously the worst thing you could do is hit into a double play. But even with two outs, or with nobody out where the run scores, that is a terrible job situationally. And when you hit that many balls on the ground, like the Mets did, you're going to find yourself in some bad spots. Now, I know that's not the only thing that has to play into situational hitting, so I don't want to oversimplify it, right? Sometimes maybe swinging too big, maybe not shortening up is the problem. But I do think that this philosophy is going to be better than the incoming philosophy is going to be better than the outgoing philosophy. And I say that acknowledging that I'm not a fan of Eric Chavez or Jeremy Barnes.
Yeah, and I think no matter what, like, doesn't matter what we say here, like, you're always going to have a fan that is either one side or the other, where they're like, oh, I'm sick of these guys and these philosophies of trying to lift the ball too much and hitting home runs and they're just going to strike out a bunch of times. And then you have the other side where it's like, oh, I'm tired of, the fact that we're, they're hitting the ball on the ground too much. We got to be lifting the ball. It's like, no, you can't win. Like, that's why I've said for, the entirety of this show, like, it's impossible to, want a certain person to be in this job, because it's a thankless job, really, because even when you do well, it's not you, it's the player. And when you do bad, it's not the player, it's you. So it's, again, you hope for the best. And hopefully the new voice or new voices carry some weight. And the most important thing, like I said last week, I'll reiterate it right now, is having the same universal message between two coaches is important. And that permeating throughout the entire organization, that in itself is a win to me, and hopefully it's something I can carry and this team can show off some of the the positives of that.
Yeah, and again, I said this last week. A lot of people are here, but for the people who weren't, you never know when new listeners jump on. They acted like good soldiers, Jeremy Barnes, Eric Chavez, while it was going on. Again, Eric Chavez kind of threw the Mets under the bus in the foul territory interview after he was fired. But it's clear that Jeremy Barnes and Eric Chavez had different philosophies with regards to how to approach hitting. And you're not going to have that now. Whether the message is good, whether we agree with it or not, there needs to be a consistent message. And to your point, Jeff Cohen does bring this up. He says, do hitting coaches really make a difference? Maybe to the young players, but not to established stars, Soto, et cetera. Probably not. Yeah, probably not. But,
yeah,
every team employs them, and most of the teams employ 2, and some of them employ 3. So not to make light of your comment, Jeff, it's fair. It doesn't make a tremendous difference, but there's a reason why it's been a job in baseball for a very long time, but it's also a reason why we're trying not to spend that much time on it, right? I
was just gonna say, like, no matter what, like, it doesn't matter what level you play at. It's always nice to have eyes on you to let you know, hey, I know this is what you're doing, but this is where I think this is what the issue is. Like, it's just, to me, it's always like small tweaks here and there when it comes to the star, where I think the most important thing is for these young players, which is what I want to see the most, is having said success that we see in the minors. I know it's not the same game and velocity is different and there's an adjustment period. I understand. I'm not saying that that's not part of the entire equation, but still, overall messaging felt as though it was different from AAA or AA, AAA to the majors. So if we could just make all of that unison, and I think it could potentially speed up the said process of getting more comfortable, and we could actually see these guys go out there and be successful, as opposed to having as many ups and downs as these kids have had over the last handful of years.
Ethan K.L. with a good question saying, if Stearns knew both Barnes and Chavez had 2 different views, why did he think it was okay to keep them both around? It's a good question. Maybe I spoke a little bit too much in the definitive. It seems to me that Barnes and Chavez had some overlap. I think there's a Venn diagram where they, had some similar views, but I think their overall philosophies were a little bit more different, separate, right? And I think, and this is just pure speculation on my part, so just to be clear and just to be fair, Chavez is here for a long time. Chavez survives multiple regimes. Chavez survives being a bench coach and then going back to being a hitting coach. Jeremy Barnes comes in. Maybe he just kind of acquiesces a little bit to the guy who's had the job for longer. And also, in that sense, you have a guy in Chavez who is the hitting coach, and you have a guy in Jeremy Barnes who is the assistant hitting coach. Maybe that's part of the reason why the nomenclature and the title change for the director of Major League Hitting Development. And, now Troy Snitker's been hired as the hitting coach, not the assistant hitting coach. So again, that's pure speculation on my part. But when you look at it, maybe there was just a role, we've all probably experienced it at some point in our professional lives, right? Where you're like, I feel like I have some input here, but I don't know if I feel comfortable because I don't know if I'm empowered to give my thoughts on this. And maybe that's the difference. So Ethan, great question, because I shouldn't say it as definitively as if David Stearns didn't know what was going on, but maybe there was just a little bit of a breakdown where it's like, Barnes is like, I don't know, man. I'm just, okay, fine. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
I think that, and I've said this before, like when someone first comes into a job, they see what fits with them or what could fit with them, and then they allow things to play out as opposed to just ripping everything out at the jump start. Now, granted, I have said before, and I do believe this, that when you come in, you should hire your people right away. And if there was ever even a question, I think Stearns should have pulled said trigger in that moment. But I think also you're stuck with it for 2 years because you decide, okay, we're going to allow this to play out this year. Let's see if it works. And if it doesn't align with me properly, we will move on. But then the Mets go on the run that they do. in 24, and now it kind of forces you to run it back and keep everyone in the same spots, and then things go south, and you're kind of and then people start screaming like, why didn't you get rid of these people? It's like, well, it just worked, and it was working, and we weren't going to rip everything out, because then we would have been screamed at for ripping everything apart when we just got to where we were. So why would we do that? So it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I think that I understand why they were back for 25, and finally the right decision was made, where, you've been here for a long time, and it's just time for a new voice. And then you bring in new, and then you hope for the best moving forward.
To quote the late, great Owen Hart, enough is enough, and it's time for a change.
And he is not a nugget.
He is not a nugget. That is a back wall attitude era WWE reference for those of you who play along.
Armand will get it. Armand will get it.
Yes. Paulie S saying, hey, all missed the start of the show because I forgot the clocks went back in the UK. Dope. Clocks go back here in the States on Saturday. Well, I guess technically Sunday morning.
Sunday morning. Yeah.
Don't forget to do that. Ethan KL saying, so they agreed to disagree. I just think, again, I think it's more of the guy who came in after the fact, maybe just, this is Barnes, was just, just acquiesced a little bit more to what Chavez was already doing. Chavez was the guy. Chavez had the philosophy. He's the hitting coach. I'm the assistant hitting coach. We're going to do what he does. We're going to go his route. So I don't know. Again, that part of it is pure speculation.
And I just picture it as like someone who's like, based off the way that Chavez speaks, it just came across as though Chavez is the guy in the cage working with guys, and he's going over like, do this and this and this, and like he's like breaking things down. And then Barnes is in the other corner or in the other cage, and he's the one with the iPad out and saying, look at all this data, look at this, look at this. And it's just like, if you're going into both, or it's like you're kind of creating two different sides of hitting, and who's going to go to who, and then if someone switches, and then there's I'm not saying it created I'm not saying that's where the toxicity potentially came from with anything, but I do think it is kind of weird when you have two people talking to you and they are trying to help you in both ways, but they're very different. And that kind of, that's the essence of, stepping on someone else's toes.
Well, Ibby, I don't want to relitigate some of this stuff, but since we're in the conversation, one of the biggest things that frustrated me with Eric Chavez, and he said as much, in his Foul Territory interview that happened when we were on hiatus, he's talking about maximizing guys' strengths. And we already shouted out Carson and Mets Weekly, and shout out to them because they did a show, after that interview happened with Eric Chavez, and they kind of called out Eric Chavez for the bullshit in that, because look, we all would like every player to be a more complete hitter. Some guys are just not built that way. Now, look, do I want Francisco Alvarez trying to hit a home run so much so that he is swinging wildly at pitches that are sliders down and away in the other batter's box? No, I don't want that. But there is a difference between that and taking a guy who damn near hit 30 home runs as a 21-year-old rookie and saying, hey, hit singles to right field.
Hey, you think you're good? You're not.
Yeah, like that's insane.
Yeah.
Like, guys, and Ibby and I talked about this throughout the season when we were talking about Alvarez through his trials and tribulations. Francisco Alvarez would be a more productive hitter and a better hitter if he hit 220 with 30 home runs than he would be if he hit 255 or 260 with 10 home runs. He's a catcher. If he hits 30 home runs, that is insane. There's not a lot of catchers in baseball that do that now. And that the way that lengthens your lineup. And again, I'm not telling you to just sell out for the power, but if you're Eric Chavez, you have to teach this guy, hey, your power is great. We have to cut down on the swing and miss. That should be the message, not you have to hit more singles. Fuck off with the singles. I'm sorry. And I don't know, Ibby, I don't know if that's going to bother some people who listen to the show that are it
affects
older
average.
School.
Yeah.
But tell me I'm wrong about the will you want him to hit 220 with 30 home runs, or you want him to hit 260 with 10?
I would rather have, if I can, again, you look at a position It's about, again, maximizing what they can provide. If a guy's strength is power, like I've said so many times before, you build out a lineup that allows someone to do what they are meant to do. You're allowed to be what you're allowed to be, which is what that's why I said Juan Soto is going to allow Pete Alonso to have a fantastic year, because Pete Alonso doesn't have to worry about being some 290, 300 hitter that people thought he needed to be. Because you don't have to, his job is to be an up and down power hitter, because his job is to go out there and hit 40 homers. If my catcher is going to bat 220, it's like, ooh, is that considered a sour spot in my lineup? Well, no. If he's hitting 25 home runs, when the position, you're lucky if you get 10 to 15 home runs at the position, unless you have a superstar there, like a Cal Raleigh or so on, or Salvador. Like if you're lucky to have a player like that, God bless. But if you don't, then you're begging for something that, you know, gives you something of worth outside of just being a dead spot in defense, which is essentially what Luis Torrens is, a dead spot, but he's got great defense. But if my catcher, my young stud catcher, can go out there and bat 220, 225, maybe 230, but he can hit 25, 30 home, let him do it. Let him showcase the power. I don't need base hits to right field so he can just slog his way into a double play because we were hitting the ball on the ground too much. Like, you don't need that. No, hit the ball in the air.
Yeah. And that's one of the philosophies, you know, we talked about it with Snitker at the top of the show. The pulling fly balls is how most, or pulling the ball in the air, I should say.
Yes.
Pulling the ball in the air is how most hitters in Major League Baseball are successful. Ibby, it's how most people who play baseball are successful. You know what I mean? Like, not everybody has David Wright or Juan Soto or JD Martinez in his prime or Manny Ramirez or whatever, Mike Piazza. Pick your player. This prestigious power to the other field, or dare I say, like, the other way in the alley. Like, that's very difficult. But most guys, to their pull side, can pull home runs and can pull doubles. So you have to take that into consideration. Again, it's not about selling out for home runs. It's just about, you know, making sure that you are maximizing in the case of Francisco Alvarez, a single player's potential, but you also have to make sure that you're maximizing most guys' potential. And most guys are not going to be successful consistently hitting the ball the other way. Carson checking in. He must have heard his ears ringing as we've been shouting him out. And the boys at Mets Weekly, since we started the show. Did Alvarez think his power is good? Because I didn't, which is, him pretending to be Chavez. Ethan KL saying, if Alvarez can give you 20 to 30-ish homers with a Met average, I'll be happy. That's perfectly fine. Followed it up by saying, that's amazing to have out of your catcher. Absolutely true. Odd Villain saying that I'll be drunk AF in the alley in New Orleans on Sunday morning. I don't give a F about the time change. I will say this, Odd. I don't know if you've been to New Orleans before. It kind of sounds like you have, based on some of the things you said earlier about going. I love New Orleans. I've been there a lot. I will give you some recs if you need. Just hit me up on Instagram, and I will give you some good.
He's probably wasting his time going to a Saints game. That's what he's probably doing.
I'll give you some food and drink recs as far as New Orleans goes, and that just goes out to anybody who's traveling. I traveled a lot, so I have a lot of recs for a lot of places. So hit me up whenever you're going somewhere. Odds are, I don't know, it's a good chance I've been there before. Anyway, Maybe I think that's enough as far as the hitting coach is concerned for now. You know, we can talk more about this stuff later in the offseason, whatever. Yeah. I think we should move on to what I think is the more polarizing topic. Rosie brings it up earlier saying, I'm concerned about Antoan Richardson walking away. We got the news first from Jeff Passan earlier in the week that said, you know, the Mets did not have a deal in place with Antoan Richardson. Seemed like they wanted him to stay. He has now basically said that he's not going to stay, doesn't have interest in staying. And, I'm sure once the offseason starts in earnest, we're going to find out why, because he's probably going to wind up going somewhere else. But I think this is a good comment from Ethan that just says hiring a guy from outside the organization for bench coach probably pissed off Richardson, to which Francine says, do we know that Richardson wanted to be the bench coach? Ibby, I think the timing makes sense. I think we found out that he was going to leave the organization after a hitting coach was hired and after a bench coach was hired.
Yep.
Now maybe he doesn't want the hitting coach role, but it seemed like Antoan Richardson, with all the good that he did on the defensive side, on the base running side, specifically those two areas, it seems like a guy who maybe wants to be a manager, who maybe wants to be a bench coach, and the Mets did not necessarily see it that way, or at least they wanted to go, in a different spot for that and retain him in his current role. You can't get mad at a guy who wants to grow his career. We talked about it before in terms of the titles and being hired away for different spots and things like that. These guys have ambitions, man. Guy doesn't want to be a first base coach forever. So I don't know. We could talk about the merits of the Mets letting him go or whatever. I think I would have liked to keep him. Let me say this.
Of course.
I would have loved if he stayed. I think if you're spewing venom and vitriol about a first base coach leaving in October, you need to chill. You need to chill out.
To bring up what you were saying before about how Chavez came across in certain things as well, I love how he just comes across very passive aggressive in his posts on Instagram, especially when he posts a photo of Antoan Richardson saying how somebody needs to sign this guy. This guy is a weapon, this and that. Like, it just comes across, well, if you want to be pissed off at the Mets because they got rid of you, like, so be it. It's what you want to do or whatever. But in general, I put out, my 2-minute video and my tweet on this already. A lot of people saw what I said, and it's fine. But the fact that so many people took this as an opportunity to just scream, and when I mean, like, I've been on Mets Twitter since 2009. Like, I understand what people go. I know what the landscape is like. I get it, but a lot of those things were more appropriate. The fact that a fan base on what was it? A Tuesday? Monday? When does this happen? Monday? On a Monday.
Yeah, sometime this week.
If this happens on a Monday in the middle of the day and people just hop on and they are losing their mind. They're losing their shit over this. They're screaming from the rooftops that this team is poor. This is Wilpon. This is to sell the team. All this nonsense. And of course, it's an easy way for people to attack David Stearns as well, which I have plenty of thoughts on, and we'll talk about that shortly.
We'll talk about David Stearns.
Yeah,
but
we
just in a
But
vacuum, this situation.
This entire thing it's unfortunate because you wanted him to stay. But I cannot fault the guy, to John's point, as I said in my video as well. I can't fault the guy who potentially wants to better his career. When you want something and your name is bantered about as much as that, nobody heard anything about first base coaches ever. And now this year, with the way that the Mets had their success when it came to stealing bases, that was credited to Antoan Richardson. So
as it
good
should
for
be.
him, as it should be. Good for him. Did I want to lose him? No, I didn't. Do I hate that he's gone? Sure, I do. You love having great coaching that helps maximize what we just said, the players that you have. But I can't fault the guy if he wanted to be a bench coach. And when you, as a person, are a part of a staff and you see them go outside the organization, to Ethan's point before, and you hire Kai Correa, who is a 36-year-old, up and comer that people see as a potential star, what have you, within a dugout at some point. You see that happen and you go, okay, this guy clearly might have an inside track already if things go south with Mendoza. And he probably has people in mind for his staff. And maybe that doesn't bode well for me. So what am I going to do? I think I can't get in the dugout. So my best bet is to go elsewhere. And I preface this by also saying to people, if he leaves and becomes a first base coach somewhere else, don't take that as an opportunity to bash the Mets either, because he might, if he wanted to go somewhere else to prove his worth so he could be seen in a better light as
Correct.
a bench coach for said team because he's trying to become better known within whatever organization he ends up in. I know Mets fans are going to scream the second he goes somewhere and he's going to take a first base job. I know that they are because that's in their DNA. That's what's going to happen. But I'm telling you, don't take it as that because it's about proving your worth to wherever it is that you're going. And of course, if he ends up going somewhere as a bench coach or a different type of title that's not just first base coach, understand that that's why he chose not to come back to the Mets. It's not always about money. You want to progress in your career and you have goals and you have aspirations. And maybe that's just what happened here. But Mets fans don't want to see both sides. They want to have their narrative. They want to have it ingrained in their head. They want to scream about it. And I get that you're upset that this team had a rough year, but to take it out here, I don't think I think it's misplaced. I think it's misguided. And I don't think you should be losing your mind over a first base coach. I really don't.
I'll bring up the other coach that got lost in the shuffle with all of this as the example. Before last season, the Mets hired Desi Drusel to be their assistant pitching coach. They hired him away from the Yankees. Now he leaves the Mets to go back to the Yankees to become what? The assistant pitching coach. That means that he was not going to be the pitching coach here with the Mets.
Correct.
They probably gave him an opportunity to interview. They gave him an opportunity to seek other employment.
Yep.
And he has decided to go back to a place where he had success. If I'm the Mets, and look, a lot of people, you and I liked it because Drusel did a lot of good stuff with the Yankees pitching staff prior to coming here. I know Joe DeMayo lauded it on the Mets pod. A lot of people were into bringing him over here. On the flip side of things, can we blame the Mets for not elevating this guy to pitching coach after they fired their pitching coach and they had one of the worst pitching performances in Major League Baseball throughout their Major League staff? So the guy left to go take the same job at another organization to rebuild his value, to go back to a comfortable place. Antoan Richardson was great here. That's the difference, right? Desi Drusel did not have the greatest year because the Mets pitching staff didn't have a great year. Right. So we're aware of Richardson because of how good he was. But that means that everyone in baseball is now aware of Richardson because of how good he was. And maybe you're spot on because look, if he takes a bigger job than he was going to get with the Mets, no one is going to be upset. But if he takes a first base job somewhere else, people are going to get all angry all over again.
Yep.
And you have to realize that now when they make the hire they do in Kai Correa, whether it works or it doesn't, whether you like it or you don't, and all of that is fair, he is blocked. They're not gonna fire Mendoza and then fire a bench coach and then give the math doesn't math. There's nowhere for him to make a move. He knows if he re-signs here, he's a first base coach.
Right.
And that's it. Probably for the length of his contract. He's
and the
not
other
going to
thing,
get promoted, and he's taken this opportunity to go outside of the organization. And I can't blame him. I'm bummed. I wanted him back, but I can't blame him at all. And I can't blame the Mets. Because again, if you wanted a guy who had managerial experience and bench coach experience, you go and you get that guy.
And again, with Mets fans are screaming because they wanted him to be their first base coach and their mind when it came to stealing bases. So does that mean you would have been angry if he was the bench coach? Like, you seems like you want him to be your first base coach. Like, did you want Richardson to be your bench coach? Like, is that what you wanted? Because if it's not, then I don't know what you're screaming about. Like, because clearly it seems as though he wants more. Are you going to be upset, or would you have been upset if they would have said that, Antoan Richardson's not our first base coach anymore, he's going to be the bench coach instead? Like, would you have accepted that, or would you have complained about that as well? Like, I think we're yelling about the wrong things. People are yelling about the wrong things and caring about I understand that losing him does matter in the sense of what he provided for this team. But if the guy wants something different, it doesn't matter what you throw at him. Like, he's going to want to do what he wants to do. That's just life. Like, it's not. Look, we've talked about before, and I've said this on episode 1 of this show, and we are on episode 216 now. Episode 1, I said, money is great. Money's going to get us a lot of things, but it's not going to get you everything. And you're not going to be spending as much as you think you're going to be spending. Just because you have all the money doesn't mean that the guy's going to take it, because he might want something different. And that's life.
A lot of good comments. Carson says, I'm in the minority, but with the scattered success my teams have had, I'm attached to no one, whether I prefer them to be here. Antoan Richardson has the business part on his mind, and that's 100% fine.
Agreed. 1,000%.
Great
1,000%.
comment. Cindy said a lot of different things that I agree with. I just think this is the best one to highlight it. Just simply, I wanted him back. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to go batshit crazy about this. Francine responding to Jeff Cohen, but also just in and of itself is a great comment. I'm not angry about Richardson leaving. I'm just sad that he is. All of that is fine. Again, I think I would have been ecstatic for him to come back. It was great that the Mets didn't let him go when they purged all these other coaches from their staff. But if he wants something else and he's now blocked, you can't force the guy to stay because he doesn't have a contract. Odd Villain with a great one. Kai Correa looks like he plays Yu-Gi-Oh still, but then says, honestly, probably a genius. That is a great comment. Truman Quinn with 2 comments that I saw you highlighted. They came at different times, but I think they're connected. Wake me up when Stearns gets fired and the Dodgers are old, which I think I think that's a little tongue in cheek. I know he's down on Stearns, but I think it's a sarcastic comment. But then this part following it up, it took Dodgers 10 years to build. We need to spend $600 million to catch up. I'm just going to let you take it away because you started both of these comments, and it seems like you're chomping at the bit to get into it.
No, I mean, before I even bother, do you want, this is part of the whole Stearns conversation. Do you want to get into that now? Do you want to take a break before we get into, how do you want to handle it? What are you thinking?
I will say this. I just want to echo the sentiment because I don't think Truman was here live last week. May have listened to it back after the fact or watched it later on. I will say this to the second comment. I said this last week, and I will say it again, and I will say it until I pass out. Everyone wants the Mets to be the Dodgers until it's time to be the Dodgers. And what I mean by that is David Stearns doesn't know what he's doing. David Stearns is a small market GM. He can't change and shake that mentality. When you look at the Dodgers, they have a guy who came from the Rays, a small market GM. They have, the Mets are too analytical. The Dodgers are the one of, if the most analytical organization in the sport. We want to be the Dodgers. To Truman's point, it took the Dodgers 10 years to get to the point that they're at. The Mets have tried to actually fast track it in a lot of ways. Cohen has thrown money at stuff the way that the Dodgers earlier in their, they did throw money at it to be competitive, but Cohen has tried to do it quicker. The Dodgers really waited till they could go get Mookie Betts. Steve Cohen got were spending the door immediately.
Yeah, they were spending in the beginning when they were getting the likes of, Adrian Gonzalez and Carl Crawford, that blockbuster deal that didn't really pan out that great, but they were putting out names to get people to come to the stadium because they had to build things behind the scenes. And again, when I see things,
because the sentiment from the fan base was so bad, because the guy was literally using the Dodgers. McCourt was using the Dodgers like a slush fund to pay off personal debts. That's basically, I mean, it's not exactly but what the Wilpons did with Bernie Madoff and being a cash poor organization coming out of it is basically just as bad. Major League Baseball should have forced the Wilpons to sell once they knew that they were involved in Bernie Madoff. Yeah, but Bud Selig was buddy with Fred Wilpon, and he swept it under the rug. And, if you do this, and if you hire Sandy Alderson, and you do this, and you do that. And look, it worked out for the Mets because we got Steve Cohen, or the Mets fan, whatever. But it'd be that was such a bad You're telling me these guys who are real estate moguls in New York didn't realize that the return that they were getting from Bernie Madoff was fraudulent? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying that they were as bad as him who running the Ponzi scheme, but like they were complicit. So I don't want to hear this thought process that like Steve Cohen comes in and just, sorry, I don't want to go off. Rome wasn't built in a day. Thank you, J-Mac.
It
Rome wasn't built in a day.
These things take time. And again, like I put out the question to everyone in the chat, and 35 votes so far. If you haven't already voted, make sure that you do. Do you still trust in David Stearns? Which is obviously a big part of why I chose the thumbnail that I did this week, because it feels like a lot of people have this broken trust, or they don't trust this process anymore, and this and that. And I know, Rosie, I start off one of your comments as well. 71% right now say that they still trust in him, and 29% say that they don't. And to the ones that don't, we're going into year 3. I understand that you could start asking questions, like legitimate questions moving forward, because you're 3 years in, you want to see progress. But everything else, like you have success year 1, you falter year 2, but everything else behind the scenes is going the way it's supposed to. Like, you are building something, you are creating, and you have one of, if not the top farm systems in baseball that now you can use as actual capital to get whatever it is that you need to get better. And I just think that, the success that the minors had this year in general, when it came to winning, and I know nobody cares about the minors winning, but the fact that they are putting together something that looks as though it's a well-oiled machine, which is what the Dodgers are behind the scenes, because no matter who they lose, it doesn't matter. I said it last week. If they wanted to, like, after they dealt away all that stuff to get Trey Turner and Max Scherzer, when they did, everyone's like, oh great, the Dodgers are at least now done when it comes to having a farm system. They got rid of everybody. And it's like, no, that got turned over in like a year and a half. And they have like 6 of the top 120 prospects right now. And if they wanted to, they can go out and get Tarek Skubal if they wanted to, because they wouldn't even feel it, because they continue to build. This is how you win. It does take time. The fact that someone mentioned in the comments took 10 years for the Dodgers. I get that Mets fans want something because they're tired, and we just came up on 39 years since 86. Like, I understand that you want to win. You don't think I want to win? You don't think that John wants to? You don't think that we want the feeling of 24 every single year, but to actually finish it? The feeling we had in 15, the feeling we had in 06 that obviously fell short, the feeling that we had in 2000. Like, you don't think of course we want these things. We barely have seen this team get into the playoffs back-to-back years, and we can count on our hands how many times they've actually been in the playoffs. Of course we want these things. But for Mets fans to think that this team, or that you are as a fan entitled to something, even though you're a fan of a team that has not had that much success, I don't know where you get off. I really don't. Like, I know you want the world. And like I just said, we all do. We all want the world. But it takes time. And I've said it time and time again on the show, and people hate me for saying it, and that's fine. But you have to let something play out. Everyone who thinks that David Stearns is on some sort of hot seat, I hate to break it to you, he's got a 6-year deal, and they're going to see this 6 years through. I'm telling you right now, because they are building, whether you like it or not. They're going to see this through, because this is the guy that Cohen wanted. This is the guy that he rubber stamped. This is the guy that's going to run my baseball ops and run my team, and I'm going to feed the money into. That's what's going to happen, whether you like it or not. So allow it to play out. And yeah, I mean, I get so hopped up on this because I think Mets fans just get a little bit over the top. That's all.
Let me bring up a couple comments. We'll head into the break. When we come out of the break, we're going to continue to talk about this. I'll use the comments as a segue. And then there's something that I want to bring up where I think, because I agree with you, basically 100%. But I think there is a place where you can put a little bit of criticism or skepticism. But I still have some. I'll come back. Carson says, in play to Moneyball, if you try to spend like the Dodgers, you will end up like the Angels. It's true. Like, you can't just throw money, because, Rosie says the philosophy on pitching cost them dearly. Well, why did they operate that way with the pitching?
Because
They
everything
operated
behind
that
it
way-
was terrible.
Correct.
Yeah.
They operated the way they did with the pitching this year because last year when Stearns first came in, they had nothing. They had to bring in people. They had to sign people to rich deals because they couldn't develop pitching because they didn't have anybody in the pipeline. And so that's how you wind up scrambling to try to find ways to get effective innings. Now, look, does that excuse Frankie Montas? It doesn't. Of course not. It's a bad deal. It's probably the worst deals David Stearns is ever going to make in his career. But you have to understand that the pitching sank them because he was trying to spend on the margins for pitching because of how fragile and expensive it is to go out and buy top flight pitching. Oh, and by the way, there wasn't a reluctancy to buy top flight pitching. The top flight pitching they tried to buy didn't want to take what they were selling. They tried to give Yamamoto the richest contract a pitcher has ever signed, sight unseen. He said no. But he's a guy who you would give that money to because he was 25 years old. They tried to sign Roki Sasaki and he said no. That doesn't mean that you turn around and you give 31-year-old Max Fried 8 years. That's stupid.
Or 6
It
years.
doesn't mean that you turn around and give Corbin Burns 6 years.
Yeah.
Corbin Burns got hurt near immediately.
And he
Would
looked terrible.
Right. Would Corbin Burns have helped if he stayed healthy? Yeah.
Sure.
Well, if wishes were fishes, the world would be an ocean. Who
That is true.
cares? So it's not to take Rosie to task on this, but it's like you have to understand where, and it's not just Rosie. This is not directed at you.
No,
It's
no.
everybody. You have to understand that there is a willingness to spend. The Mets, and I don't want to relitigate the past. The Mets said to Yamamoto, they said, look, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Jesus.
There you go.
They said to him, what deal did the Yankees offer you? Okay, we'll beat it. $325. He was like, cool, thank you very much. We'll let you know. He took the deal to the Dodgers. Mets offered me $325 for this. If you match it, I'll sign. They were like, cool, we'll match it. He was like, thank you. And he never went back to the Mets. And suddenly, now that's the Mets' fault that they didn't overpay Max Fried. The Yankees weren't going to pay Max Fried until the Mets signed Juan Soto.
Right, because they had the money to spend. And now I see your comment on saying, Blake Snell just saying but Blake Snell was also a guy that was a West Coast guy, and you could say, well, money could potentially talk, but let's not pretend like Blake Snell was blowing the doors off for the regular season because the guy wasn't pitching until August because he got hurt. So it's like we can't you can watch Blake Snell, who's a phenom when it comes to the playoffs. He's great in the playoffs. Like you love watching him. He's got that bulldog in him, but we can't act like he was this all-world guy during the regular season because he only had a handful of starts because he was hurt the majority of the year.
As he always is, by the way.
And he's predominantly he stinks in the first half and he's dominant in the second. Yeah, he stinks in the first half, dominant in the second half. That's been his MO for a while, and it rides into the playoffs. But this guy wasn't helping us until August if he was even here. And odds are if he was a Met, he probably wouldn't even came back. He probably would have been out for the year. But
yeah. Look, here's another one that I didn't even think of, not on the level, but also worth bringing up from Armand. The Mets wanted Kevin Gausman years ago, and Gausman stayed on foul territory. He chose the Blue Jays because he doesn't like New York. What are you gonna when that stuff happens? And to borrow Carson's line, that's how you end up like the Angels. You need to identify players that are worth going after, either in prospect capital or in money, and go full tilt to try to get them. And then if you don't, you have to be smart with how you pivot. The Mets identified somebody that was worth full tilt going after, Juan Soto. Guess what? They got him. And they didn't stop until they got him. They paid him more money than anyone else would pay him, including the Yankees. So you can't be mad. They went out, they did it. They identified the guy, they got him. The only difference with something like Yamamoto is that they never got the chance. And then if you want to take a guy like Crochet, to your point, Ibby, we don't know how serious the thing was for Crochet. Because like you said, the Red Sox could always top the offer. So then it becomes the Dodgers thing all over again. It's just prospect capital and not money. Oh, yeah, okay, that's cool. You want to offer us those 4 players? Okay, that sounds good. We'll let you know. They get on the phone with the Red Sox. They never hang up, and that's it. And then he's a Red Sox. Now, can you right the wrong theoretically? Like, can you make up for it by trading for Tarek Skubal? Of course you can.
Yeah.
Right? Will the Mets get some criticism if Tarek Skubal gets traded somewhere else and they didn't make a representative offer or whatever? We find that out. Yeah, I think that's some well-deserved criticism at that point. But if Tarek Skubal doesn't get traded because Detroit's like, look, I know he's going to walk, but we can't fucking trade this guy because we're never going to get value back either way.
Right.
Then David Stearns sucks because he didn't go to Detroit and hold
this
GM
fan base
at
will.
gunpoint.
I said that last week. This fan base will crush him even if he's not traded. They're gonna say you didn't try hard enough. Like that's what it's gonna be. That's exactly what it's gonna be.
It's insane. Well, Carson says, look, no one is claiming that Snell and Burns aren't better than Minaya and Montas, but not everything is fantasy baseball. It's not a black and white conversation. To go back to Joe DeMayo, shout out Joe DeMayo. He said people act like Frankie Montas signed $300 million deal. It was a bad deal, but it's a bad short-term deal. And that's the thing. You can just move on because it was a short-term deal. You know what?
And the money you have.
Yeah. You know what's harder to move on from? What if Corbin Burns is never the same?
Yeah, you're saddled for 6 years.
Under the hood, it looked like he already wasn't the same. And now he has Tommy John surgery. So what if he's not the same? And you got, what did they get? 6 starts? I don't even remember. 6 starts out of him, 10 starts,
something like
whatever,
that. And they weren't even that good starts either. They weren't even that good.
No. So that's the kind of thing that can sink you. So you don't pivot just for the sake of pivoting. You have to pivot. You have to have several irons and several fires at once. David Stearns knows that. And this is not an apologist show for David Stearns, because like I said, the criticism that he has gotten for building the team that was flawed from the beginning is fair. This team was flawed, and ultimately their flaws sunk them. And he deserves criticism for that. He had a bad year.
Truman, sorry, guys.
But I'm just saying, you can't throw the baby away with the bathwater. Yeah. You can't ask for this guy to be fired. He's been here for 2 years. The organization has never looked healthier. I said it, and I stand by this. Dave, and it's a low bar. It's like me saying, Rex Ryan is one of the best coaches, second best coach the Jets have ever had. Well, the Jets have had terrible coaches. For me to sit here and say that David Stearns is the best GM/president of baseball ops since Frank Cashin is not crazy. What did Omar Minaya win? What did Sandy Alderson win? What did Steve Phillips win? What did Jim Duquette win? Before him, you had a guy who drove drunk. Before him, you had a guy who was a pervert. Before him, you had a guy who got ousted from Major League Baseball. You want that? You want to go back to Billy Epler? You want to go back to Zach Scott? You want to go back to Jared Porter? Who do you want? We waited for David Stearns. And don't tell me Theo Epstein. Don't tell me a pipe dream, something that's never going to happen. You got the guy. What more do you want?
Because they think that having the guy automatically means that you just start winning. And it's like you don't want to do the work. You have to put in the work because you have to build, because you didn't have anything to build off of. You didn't have the proper analytics. You were behind the 8 ball when it came to your minor league system. That was stated about how the Mets were extremely archaic before Steve Cohen even came in. And I bring up this Truman comment because I'm like these David Stearns excuses on why he didn't get an ace as white noise to fall asleep. I ask you, Truman, like who's the ace? Who did you want? Is this something that you're saying that a player that you wanted, or are you saying that for this upcoming year? Because I believe he's going to get a pitcher. I do.
The Mets will get an ace.
They will get an ace. They'll get a top of the line. So I do believe that wholeheartedly. I want to know what he means in this one, though.
I said this last week, Ibby. The Skubal thing is such a rare animal that, like, especially with the position that Detroit's in, like I said, they can't get fair value for him no matter what they do. They're damned if they do. They're damned if they don't. I don't know what they're going to do. But I think considering that's the backdrop, I think there's a good enough chance that they get Skubal as anything. You know what I mean? Like, again, like there are more likely candidates, right? Freddie Peralta seems to be a match made in heaven in terms of how the Brewers operate, how the Mets operate, the relationship between the two front offices, the ability for the Mets to take on his slight contract of $8 million and the reason for the Brewers to want to get out from under it, and the fact that the Mets can go and they can pay for Skubal next year anyway. So that seems like the likeliest. But the Mets are going, pick your person. We identified a bunch of them last week. Every show has talked about it since and before. Whether it's Sandy Alcantara, whether it's Tarek Skubal, whether it's Joe Ryan, whether it's Freddie Peralta, the Mets are going to get somebody who will instantly be the ace of their staff. And they're probably going to get them via trade. That doesn't even mention the fact that maybe they just say, hey, you know who pitches like he's the best pitcher in baseball sometimes? We can just have him for money right now. Dylan Cease. We can fix him. Just go out and spend money. And then you can keep all the prospects you want and you can go trade for somebody else. Like there's so much they can do. We haven't even talked about free agency. Just via trade, the Mets will get an ace. I promise.
Just laughing at some of the comments. Carson telling me to get the AI ready for Bailey Falter as our SP1. I don't know if this is tongue in cheek. It's saying how Freddie Peralta loves New York, heard it from his cousins who live in Corona. True story. I don't know. I mean, we know that you are the beat on the street. So if you're being serious there, that'd be great. But yeah,
this is what, of course. You know what? I was going to bring it up, but we should go into the break. Joe DeMeo, trade for one, sign one, bang. I'm going to star that because I want to bring it back up. I did want to, sorry, I went off on a little bit of a rant.
It's all good.
I do want to bring up, you know what? Let's just head into the break and we will continue this conversation on the other side. If you're watching live, don't go anywhere. 30-second pause, a little bit of a reset. We'll pick up the conversation about David Stearns and where the Mets are going to go with regards to looking for an ace, how they're going to build out this team, and where the criticism is fair and where the criticism is unfair. We're going to continue that conversation. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez. This is Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back with Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week. The conversation is hot right now about David Stearns, which is why we saved that part of the conversation and we built the show up the way that we did, starting with the lower lift stuff. The hitting coach that was hired, Troy Snitker, the departure of Desi Druschel, laid into the Antoan Richardson stuff, which then became a natural jumping off point to have the David Stearns conversation. First half is wrapped up, but the conversation about David Stearns will continue in just a few moments. But before it does, Ibby, let's hit them with a quick word from our friends over at Independent Safes.
Absolutely, John. IndependentSafes.com. Independent Safes are protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes, fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit IndependentSafes.com today for security that stands strong. And I think just goes hand in hand with what I was saying before about who I would put in the safe this week. It was just basically the Mets fans that I saw losing their minds over Antoan Richardson. Again, I understand you're upset. I understand that you saw him as a beacon for the 25 team because it was so bad. And he did provide a lot of good, and he would be, a coach that you would want on your staff. But sometimes we got to wait until the full story comes out, not just be as reactionary as we are, and realize that we are talking about a first base coach. Again, not trying to downplay what he provided for the team, but we as fans were screaming about a first base coach. Again, on a Monday, in the middle of the day. Like, let's step back for a moment, allow it to allow the full story to come out. And I've said in my video and my post, and I'll say it here again, If it comes out where it was the Mets being stingy with money, different story. I will have a completely different thought process on the entire thing. But something tells me that it's more than that. So either way, Mets fans, I'm putting you in the safe, the ones that were really screaming about it, and screaming about David Stearns in this moment, because I thought it was a little bit too much.
Yeah, I try to do something different from you in this segment, but I can't. I'll just further it on the David Stearns point. Look, again, he had a bad year. He deserves criticism for some of the thought processes that were flawed. I admitted that during the season. I admitted it at the end of the season. I'm admitting it now. But if you want David Stearns fired legitimately, and there's not sarcasm, I have to put you in the safe. And I won't say any more than that, just because we don't need to beat a dead horse. We can close up this segment and we can move into or back into the conversation at large, because I do think it's a good conversation to have. I just think that sometimes people need to understand where the conversation needs to come from, right? Like, just a couple things to kind of transition the conversation. This was from all the way back at the beginning of the show. Corey Holzer said, "We have been in a playoff hunt both seasons under Stearns, so complaining about him really just makes me scratch my head." Yeah, he had a down year, but he had a great first year. And I don't think that that's enough to be like, this guy's got to get out of here. You need to build organizational continuity. You really do. You need to build some consistency. Rosie said this earlier. Mets fans don't trust Stearns after this year's performances. That's why there was an overreaction to something like Antoan Richardson, which I think is accurate. I think that's why there is an overreaction, but I think that overreaction is just that, an overreaction. Francine agrees with Rosie, saying we have so little faith in Stearns, so we're suspect of everything.
But my one thing, I'm going to cut in real quick.
Go ahead.
What exactly, like, again, Francine, I'm not calling you out or anything, but like, when I see this, you have so little faith in Stearns. What would cause Mets fans to have faith in anyone then? Like, what exactly is who do you want to come in, and what do you want them to do? What is it? So someone has to come in year one and win a World Series? Like it's that simple? Like,
well, that's what I said.
I don't think that's
what I was saying before. It'd be like, the Mets got to a World Series with Steve Phillips as the GM in 2000. So is that what you want? Do you want to lose the World Series to the Yankees and have a team that was overmatched? Is that what you want? Is that better? That's not better, right? Like, he was, for all intents and purposes, a terrible GM under a terrible ownership. Then you fast forward to 2006, you have Omar Minaya, a guy who I think was a very good GM. That team never even got to the World Series. Now, should they have? Probably. A bounce of the ball here, a bounce of the ball there. They get to the World Series. Do I think that the Mets beat the Tigers in 2006? I do, but they didn't. Yeah, and they never got back.
Nope.
And not only did they not get back, but 2007 and 2008 were worse collapses than what we just watched. So is that what you want? Is he not coming at you, Francine? I don't know if she's still here, but not to say, is that what you want, Francine? But it's like, that's the standard. People are like, well, what about Omar Minaya? Okay, well, he didn't win. And then again, 2015, Sandy Alderson. Again, it's another ownership group. It's a bad ownership group. That's the through line. It's been the Wilpons for all those years. But, that team gets to a World Series. And that team, despite some of their deficiencies, had a tremendous amount of talent. Now, I think that the Royals just knew how to win. They were there the year before. They lost. They bounced back in a big way. I don't know if the Mets, quote unquote, should have won that World Series, but that's another team that fell flat on their face, didn't win one, and that was it. So I don't know what else we're trying to do. To this point, Ibby, David Stearns has been here for 2 years, and he has been as successful as most of those GMs, because in year one, he got to within 2 wins from the World Series, which is all that Omar Minaya could boast. Omar Minaya was 1 win away from a World Series berth. Sandy Alderson got there, and the Mets didn't really have a great showing. Steve Phillips got there, and the Mets didn't really have a great showing. So what's the standard? Like, that's what you say, like, where's the there's this sense of entitlement from a team that has never been good. Like, what are we holding this up to? What shining light, what North Star do we have? It was 40 years ago. It was Frank Cashin. Baseball's a lot different now. David Stearns is the perfect guy. Is he a perfect GM? No one is. But he's the perfect person to run this team right now. And I understand the frustration. Chaos has been 40 years without a title. Last season, you could have built on an incredible 2024. Instead, you repeat 2023. I don't know if 2023 was a different thing, man. And also, David Stearns wasn't in charge in 2023. So now is he getting blame for them having an abysmal year in 2023 with a wildly flawed roster that somebody else put together? It just doesn't.
I guess the connection there is many feeling as though this roster was not well balanced and it had its issues. And I've said on the show before that I drew parallels to 23 and 25 in terms of how I felt watching it. So I can understand where he's come from in that sense. And Joe coming in here with a comment that really sums up how I feel and I've felt in general since the start of all of this. 4 years ago, 5 years ago at this point, Stearns and Mendoza were everything we dreamed of in 24. 25 went poorly, and now they don't belong here. I consider it quite disappointing how, in ways, we have devolved as a fan base since Cohen, which I said episode 2 of.
Uh-oh.
Am I bad?
Uh-oh. You're back. You're back.
Okay.
You're back.
Okay. The biggest thing that I said on episode 2 of this show, which again, over 200 episodes ago, I said that money was going to be the downfall of this fan base. And I think that a lot of fans just see money and see the owner and think that they're going to get everything and they're going to be, the top food chain every single time. And it's not always going to be that way. You got to build it properly, but they see it and they just think automatically that if I don't get what I want, these guys suck. And if you didn't get this player, you're terrible and this and that. And then to Carson's point, I don't know if I started off or not, but Carson saying this right here. Well, I don't know who or what, but this guy's got to go. It's like you don't offer anything in terms of solution. So what exactly as a fan do you want? You don't even know what you want. That's why I get so angry about when we have conversations like this, because I know where I stand. And I'm not saying that I'm not the almighty. I'm not always going to be right. I understand that. But I'm just always trying to keep the cooler head in terms of all of this, because I think people really lose track of it and they just want to scream. And I don't think it solves anything.
Well, here's what I don't understand. People are watching this live, hearing us, seeing us. And then we get collective comments like this. Game for War saying, Stearns, our pitching lab can turn any turd into gold. Oops, nope. To which Carson says, Game for War, no one is disagreeing because he put a lot of stake in that. It worked one year, didn't work the next. But what was the solution? This is revisionist history. To which Game for War then replies, I'm not saying you're wrong, Carson, but these two, us, are acting pretty high and mighty with the don't criticize our precious Stearns. How many times have we criticized Stearns? How many times have we said it's okay to criticize Stearns? Are you not hearing what I'm saying? Then you have Truman saying, bro, Stearns made really bad decisions in 2025. I said that 25 minutes ago. So,
we're not denying that 25 wasn't a bad year. It was. Nothing worked. I just said I equated it throughout the season that I was getting 23 vibes from it based off of what I was watching.
100%.
It was a bad team. It was a boring team. It was it was lackadaisical at times. It was bad fundamentally. I'm not saying it wasn't a bad year. I'm not firing the guy off of that. I'm not. Especially when everything else within the organization is still growing and getting better, which in turn is going to lead towards more success on the field for the major league club. But that's the main point that I'm getting at. I'm not denying that 25 was bad, because it was. The fact that team did not make the playoffs is a failure. I'm not saying it's not. But I'm not going to run the guy out of town like everyone else wants to and wants to scream about something and assume automatically of what this offseason is going to be before it even starts. I think you're wrong for that. So that I will say.
Let me bring up my counterpoint, because I think a lot of people will understand. Because I don't want to sit here and just agree with you and argue with the chat. It doesn't make for good television, right? It's not interesting to just continue to do that. But I want to bring up a couple comments here. Rosie says, I don't want him gone, Stearns. I want him to do better by having a sense of urgency next year. Okay. I think there were times that you could say Stearns was a little slower to react. So I
agree with that.
That is a fair criticism. Then Cindy says, that's the other problem fans have. And Cindy has been agreeing with us for the most part. They don't trust that he will use some of the prospects to get what we need. I think if you're a little worried about that to this point, I'll say okay, because he hasn't spent big prospect capital to acquire something yet as a Met. He did it with the Brewers. He went out and got Christian Yelich, but he hasn't made that kind of a move with the Mets yet. The other thing I'll bring up is what we said before. J-Mac says, team can spend more. Now, I don't mean spend like what Carson said, spend wildly and become, spend wildly trying to reach for the Dodgers and land in Angels land. But I think here is the comment that'll take all of those, sort my argument together. Rosie says, and you can't sign Soto, spend that much money, and collapse and expect fans to trust the team. I will take the first part of that.
Okay.
Ibby, I think what the Mets need to do, it doesn't necessarily mean more spending because they've spent a ton. And it doesn't mean foolish spending because obviously that's not good for anybody. But I think the Mets need to be more aggressive in understanding what they have. And what I mean by that is that when the Los Angeles Dodgers signed Shohei Ohtani to a 10-year contract, they threw caution to the wind and they said, we're going to try to win as many World Series as we can in the next 10 years while we have Shohei Ohtani. We'll figure out resetting luxury tax. We'll figure out paying the piper when that's all over. Now, I understand that the Dodgers have a head start in that because their new ownership group took over sooner than Steve Cohen bought the Mets. Shohei Ohtani is an older player than Juan Soto, and they were more well-established when they got Ohtani to make moves like that. What I think the Mets need to do is understand what they have. Mm-hmm. They have Juan Soto for 13 more years or whatever it is, throughout his young prime and his prime and beyond. I don't really need to see a team that's like, well, Brett Beatty showed some good things last year, so he'll be our third baseman. And Mark Vientos was good 2 years ago and not really good last year, but he'll be our DH. And, we're going to piece things together and we're going to try to figure out, who's going to play center field. To me, I know you have to allow guys to develop and you can't pay for superstars at every position. But I think the Mets need to find a better version of Tyrone Taylor when they go and make a trade. I think they need to find guys who aren't superstars that are just really good, like how the Dodgers got Tommy Edman. Mm-hmm. For every Mookie Betts, there's a Tommy Edman. For every Freddie Freeman, there's a Max Muncy. For every Shohei Ohtani, there's a Kike Hernandez. To a lesser extent, there's a Teoscar
Creates
Hernandez
a team.
Because
yeah.
The Mets need to build a better team using all. I mean, I know that sounds like the most obvious thing in the world, but they need to build a better team using every single asset they have at their disposal. Analytics, player development, prospect capital, and money. They need to find a way to create a team that is not going to not only stumble and fall apart the way they did in 24 when they should never have. 25, excuse me. But a team that is not going to stumble out of the blocks and be miserable like they were in 23. Or a team that's not going to fold like a cheap cot like they did in 22. That's what the Mets need to do. That's what David Stearns needs to do. And I know it's an obvious take on the surface, but it's not about going and signing $30 million players at every position. But I can't go into the year as into some of these prospects as I am, and not into some of them as not into some of them as I am. Like, the Mets can't, trade for Freddie Peralta, re-sign Pete Alonso, and be like, okay, well, Beatty's our third baseman, Vientos is our DH, Jet Williams is our second baseman, and Tyrone Taylor is going to play center field until Carson Benz is ready. That's too many question marks for a team that has Juan Soto. Mm-hmm. I can't do that. Most of these prospects, I don't care which ones you like, which ones you don't like, they're not going to be good. And they're not going to be good enough.
It's hurtful.
I need good, I'm not picking any of them. I'm just saying, they need to understand that they need to go out and build a team. They need, you know what I'm saying? Like, they need to. Joe DeMeo, I'm telling Beatty at the QBC about you. No, listen, man, I'm good with one or two of these guys. I just don't think you can just, I don't know. It's the old adage of hope not being a strategy, I guess. And I think despite where the Mets are playing in the upper echelon of free agency, I don't think they're being aggressive enough. And I hope that changes. And I'm confident that it will. So when people use words like Stern needs to be aggressive and Stern needs to show more urgency, that's where I think the proper amount of criticism lies. Nobody knows what the conversation for Garrett Crochet was, but now is the time to strike. Now, today, not next year, not next month. Start doing this process, because the Mets have enough pieces in place to be good. They need to be better than that.
They have enough pieces in place as well on the lower end, that being in the minors, to go out and get said players to help you at the major league level, while also not giving up. It's not going to be where we've seen in years past, where this team has to, where fans would always question, like, why do other teams get said play for, their, 8th and 9th prospect? The Mets are always having to give away their top 2. Like, that's bullshit, this and that. It's like, well, it's because the Mets prospects weren't that good. So if those guys were 1 and 2 for you, they were probably, 9 and 10 for somebody else. So I think that I understand and I agree with the aggressive approach, and you have to understand what you have. And I think that this team is in a spot where it has the capital to be aggressive. And yes, if we go into the 26th season and it's an extremely quiet off season, and it's a rotation filled with more projects and not answers, and questioning if we're gonna get enough innings, or banking on someone to come back from injury, then yeah, I'm gonna have some negative things to say, because clearly the aggressive nature was not taken. But I also feel like we haven't been lied to when he speaks at these pressers, and he admitted at the end, the end of the season presser, he admitted that he needed to be more aggressive. He needed to have a little bit more urgency in spots. And I think that is something that you learn as you go. And clearly it's a lesson learned, because you saw what happened and what could have happened if you brought up Noel McLean, 2 weeks earlier. Maybe things would be different. Maybe this team makes it to the playoffs. Would it be a short stint? Who knows? Was this probably the one team that could probably upend the Dodgers? Maybe. In a short series? Maybe. but we'll never know that. So yeah, moments like that, you can question said urgency, and I understand it. So I do think that if he is not aggressive on the trade market and doesn't land an appropriate pitcher or pitchers for this team to further round out the innings that they desperately need, then yeah, I'm going to be angry, because now I'm like, well, what exactly are you waiting for? Because there are names out there that make sense, and that goes beyond the Scoobles of the world. Like I'm not going into this thinking that I'm getting Tarek School, because I think it's ridiculous to think that, because it's such a unique situation that who knows if the Tigers are even going to want to play ball. But there are players out there that are going to be available that you can have, that you can go out and get, because you have things that match the Marlins. You have things that match the Twins. You have things that match the Brewers. Like, when it comes to need, you have it. You have pitchers. You're rolling deep when it comes to pitcher at the minor league level, that you can go out and get things to better you around the diamond. Whatever it is to build out a better team, you can do it. So if those things aren't done this offseason, then yes, my questioning becomes a lot louder, and my trust begins to be a little bit more broken, because I believe that this system is where it needs to be in terms of being aggressive and not selling the farm, if you will, to go out and get a player. And you would still be fine even if you sell off a couple of pieces. So that's
my point.
Yeah, that's where I believe that this offseason needs to go. And I believe that it will, because I trust the guy and what he said, that I could have been more aggressive in spots. I could have shown more urgency in spots, and that's a lesson learned on my end. And I think that he sees that, and I think they're going to go out there and use the capital that they have, because to John's point, as much as I like Jet Williams, as much as I like Carson Bench, as much as I like Brett Beatty, as much as I like some of these guys, are they all going to be in the opening day lineup? Most likely not. And honestly, they shouldn't, because they should be worked in to those spots, because you can't have that many question marks going into a season. All things considered, with where this team has been the past 2 years, and to John's point, when bringing in someone the ilk of a Juan Soto.
I'll bring up this comment from Ethan, who says, no one on that Dodgers team is homegrown. Respectfully, I don't care. I don't
Andy
care.
Pages is.
First of all, there are enough homegrown pieces on that team. Will Smith was a
Will
Dodger.
Smith. Yeah, Will Smith,
Andy Pages, Kike Hernandez, Kershaw, obviously. There are some people who aren't quote unquote homegrown, Ibby, that I count.
But again, that's getting your farm system to where you need to be to get some players to bring in, and then obviously being proper with signing which players become available.
But also, like, just to bring up certain people, right? Like, Max Muncy is not a homegrown Dodger, but the A's didn't know what they had in Max Muncy. They didn't develop Max Muncy. The Dodgers did. So I don't care that the Dodgers didn't draft him. To me, that's a homegrown guy. I don't care that the Dodgers didn't draft Blake Trinan. Is Blake Trinan, was he ever as good with the A's or the Nationals as he was with the Dodgers?
Justin Turner,
who's not there anymore. I'm just looking at people who's on their roster currently.
Just in general. Yeah.
So, like, there's enough there. And then, okay, Mookie Betts is not a homegrown Dodger. Well, the Dodgers used their lauded farm system to go get Mookie Betts. And then they did what the Boston Red Sox wouldn't do, which is paid him. And when Mookie Betts goes to the Hall of Fame, guess which cap he's going to wear? I don't care. I don't care. There's probably some other people in the bullpen and on the bench that are, homegrown pieces. I don't care about who is and who isn't. And I don't care. And just to Will Smith, Kershaw, Pages, Sheenan, and Will Klein. Thank you. And again,
Will Klein, big 4 innings the other night, huge 4 innings the other night.
And Ibby, I don't know. People might disagree with me or semantics or whatever, but I'm counting Trinan. I'm counting Max Muncy. He's not there anymore. I count Chris Taylor. You count Justin Turner. Like, teams didn't know what they had. The Dodgers did. The Dodgers didn't pay $30 million to go get Max Muncy. He was DFA'd and traded to them. That counts. That counts to me. The other part of it is, just for the exercise, the reason why I bring that up is Ibby, the Mets have right now Nimmo on their roster, homegrown. Alvarez is going to be their catcher. He's homegrown. Nolan McLean is going to be in their rotation. He's homegrown. More than likely, David Peterson is going to be in their rotation. He's homegrown. One of, for sure, Beatty, Vientos, Ronnie Mauricio are going to be on their team next year. Homegrown. I don't think Luis Angel Acuna is going to get traded because I don't think he has high value. He's probably going to be their bench piece. Homegrown. If they brought back Pete Alonso, homegrown. Isn't that enough? I understand that the two highest players on their team in Lindor and Soto aren't homegrown. But if nothing else, forget about the possibility of two of Vientos, Mauricio, and Beatty being on the team, or forget about the prospect of Jet Williams or Carson Bench being on the team. Isn't that enough homegrown pieces that the Mets can go outside the organization, whether they spend money or spend prospects or identify a guy that they can go get that's just a good ball player that's not going to, they have enough homegrown pieces. I know you're freezing a little bit. I don't know if you've heard everybody identified as you disappear now. But if you can hear me, isn't that enough? I mean, Cindy brings up McGolf. I'm assuming that Jeff McNeil isn't going to be on the team, but yeah, he's another one. Homegrown. Isn't that enough? You could trade some guys. And you could also pay some guys. And you could also maybe identify a guy on the margins of another team that you could turn into your Max Muncy. I guess that's where my criticism of David Stearns goes. Where it's like, I want to see them this offseason make an aggressive trade. I want to see them this offseason make an aggressive signing. And then, yeah, you can do your stuff where you're identifying a Griffin Canning's not exactly the right example. A guy like Max Muncy is a better example, but just to put it in a Mets context, Griffin Canning makes sense. Like that kind of thing where you're like, I'm going to find a guy, pay him nothing, bring him in, and he's going to be a player. That's what I want to see the Mets do. And if they don't do a lot of that, then I'll be very critical. I have no idea if Ibby is here. While we wait, I'll bring up Armand here. It says Alex Call, Justin Dean, Eduardo Henriquez, and Wroblewski are all homegrown Dodgers on the World Series roster. Yeah. Like Carson saying, McLean, Tong, Sproat, Scott, that's your development gold. The real homies love pitching development. Expensive becomes inexpensive that way. Yeah. Like, I guess what I'm saying to you guys, I'm trying to identify like a player who makes sense. Okay. So it's hard because I don't work in player development, right? So I'm not going to be able to find you the Mets version of a Max Muncy. That's going to be difficult for me to identify. But when I look at a player who's coming up on free agency, right? Like who might help the Mets. There's a square peg round hole guy because MEZBX says Mets have to trade from second base and third base surplus. They do, right? But then you look at a guy like Bo Bichette and could you say like, man, Bo Bichette would make sense for the Mets at second or at third. And then maybe if you identify that guy who's still pretty young and you decide to pay him, then maybe you can trade Beatty in a deal to go get a pitcher you need or another player you need because it makes it more expendable. That's the kind of forward thinking. I know that's a big name player, but it's like, that's the kind of forward thinking I want to see from the Mets. Yeah, or like I don't think the Mets are doing both of these, Armand. Give me Bregman at third and Bo Bichette at second. But like, yeah, if you want to go get Bregman, who's not as young of a player, and then leave second base open for Jet Williams, it allows you to trade Brett Beatty, and then it makes your team overall better because the pieces fit together better. Like, I think that's what I'm trying to identify, right? Like, if you're sitting there and you're like, look, I'm putting all my eggs, and I'm not saying I would, but Jet Williams has such a high ceiling, or excuse me, such a high floor, that he's the guy that I think is the most can't miss, especially at a position like second base. So I'm going to trade McNeil, install Jet Williams to play second base. That allows me to trade Beatty in a package to go get a better pitcher, and I'm going to sign Bregman. Like, that's the kinds of moves that the Dodgers would make. And that's the kind of move that I want to see the Mets make. Again, the identifying a guy in another organization, a la Justin Turner, a la Max Muncy, and Chris Taylor to a slightly lesser extent, that's harder for me to do because I'm not, a player development guy in other organizations. But I just want to see the Mets operate like that kind of a big market team. Be aggressive in a way that you don't expect. And that's why I had that comment starred before from Joe DeMayo that I unstarred, but about the starting pitching market, trade for one and sign one, bang. Like, that's what I'm looking for. Ibi, I don't know how much of it you heard before you got cut off.
Yeah.
But basically just rattling off a list of players that the Mets have on their roster, especially if they were to bring back Pete, that are homegrown. And I'm like, that's enough. And I admitted that you and I, well, just for me, but also for you in fairness, like, we're not player development guys that know other organizations' depth charts well enough to say, we could find the Justin Turner in another team. Like, we can't do that. It's not fair to you or I. We can't find a Max Muncy, a guy who's undervalued, who's going to come in and be a starting regular for the Mets. That's hard. The example I gave, which I know is a little bit apples to oranges because it is a big name player, but it's the kind of forward thinking that I want from the Mets. And I'll just recap it really quickly for you. If the Mets said, hey, Jet Williams has the highest floor of all our prospects, and especially at a position like second base, his skill set really plays. So we're going to trade McNeil. We're going to go all in on Jet Williams. That allows a guy like Beatty to be more expendable in a deal for a pitcher. And then we're going to sign Bo Bichette to play third base. That's the guy we commit to. Or we're going to sign Bregman in a situation like that on a bigger money, shorter term deal because he's older than Bichette. We're going to have that guy play third base. It's going to make our overall team better in a way that we're not necessarily, like, when you look at the surplus of third base and second base prospects that the Mets have, you would say, and the fact that Lindor is entrenched at shortstop, there's no reason for the Mets to sign a guy like Bregman or a guy like Bichette, because they're blocked. But I want to see them make a move that's aggressive, that makes them wholly better, that doesn't rely simply on prospects, that allows them to be creative. Do you know what I mean? And I know that that's signing big money deals. I know that that's because, again, I can't. There's no way for me to find the Max Muncy in this market. I can't use that. So that's a more likely scenario. But I also think when you have the money, use the money too. Use the money, and, like, in other words, you don't have to. That's why I love the comment from Joe DeMayo saying trade for a starter and sign a starter. Like, if the Mets really wanted to, they could trade for Sandy Alcantara and sign Dylan Cease. Nothing is stopping them.
Right, they could.
And then you could trade, like, look, you probably can't trade Sean Manaea, right? But then if you have too much pitching, then trade David Peterson.
Or Senga.
Yeah. Right, or both. Sign
both.
both guys and trade both of those guys. I guess that's what I'm saying is, like, shake up the roster and be not creative, be proactive in some of this. That's what I think. People are like, oh, well, just sign this guy and have him be your DH. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But you could keep Vientos at DH and you could sign Bo Bichette. You could trade Beatty. You could trade Jet. You have Carson Bench be your center fielder. There are ways that this all makes sense.
No, there are plenty of ways you can go about it for sure.
And I think that's what I was saying when you got cut off, which is, there's already enough for people who are crazy about homegrown talent. There's plenty of homegrown talent. Yeah. Or keep all of them because arms break, Joe. But Joe's a good person to ask this question of because, and I'll obviously you respond while he's thinking this up, but sure. I ask him the same kind of question that I'm posing to you with this, kind of maniacal thought process that I have here is I want the Mets, when people say be like the Dodgers, I want the Mets to use every asset at their disposal, which I think now are very high. They have plenty of money to spend. They have plenty of prospects that people would be interested in. They have plenty of position players of major league players that people would be interested in. I think David Stearns can reshape this team in his image right now by using money, major league talent, prospects, either to trade or to say, screw it, Carson Bench is our center fielder right now. I think they can do all of that and reshape this team because I think the assets are there. I also think the nucleus is there. Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto is enough of a core base to build off of. If that means bringing back Pete, that's fine. If your version of that means not bringing back Pete, that's fine too. I think the Mets have it all right there. So I think there's a way where you can be really creative because, again, Joe is, and I think you are too, you're a little bit more pragmatic in the approach. So I don't want you to get lost in the big names of when I say Bo Bichette and Alex Bregman,
right.
I'm just go out there and just sign everybody. It's not what I'm saying. I guess this is what I'm saying. Be fluid. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. And I want to hear the comments, on that. But I do pose it to Joe because, again, Joe knows the prospects so well. Yeah. And I think Joe is a little bit more measured than I am in those approaches.
I think I don't think what you're saying is wrong. And to Carson, be fluid with the entire thing because anything you never know what's going to be in front of you, and something can be presented where it makes you shift course and want to go a different way. But I get what you're saying when it comes to having the farm and then maybe utilizing the farm to then spend money elsewhere, then trade those players to get something that you need at another position. Again, it's always about using said capital and bettering yourself in whatever area you think it is. But I also think that when you comp it to the Dodgers, I've always felt that the Dodgers, when they make deals like that, it always comes across more as a finishing piece. So it's they trade X amount of players to get Scherzer and Turner because they were going all in an attempt to win it all. And it made sense for their needs, top players on the market. It made sense. It was a finishing move. I thought that them building the way that they built, going out and spending the money that they did, and signing Mookie Betts made sense because it was a starter move towards bringing him to the next level, which then brought them the likes of Freddie Freeman and Shohei Ohtani. There are ways that these things build on top of each other. So you're not wrong in saying you could use all these things to better yourself in different ways. And being fluid is obviously what you need to do. But I also think that from everything I've seen to this point, I think it's always and no matter what, it always is this. It's player dependent. Who is this player, and is said player going to be better than whoever? I'll use your Bo Bichette, your Bo Bichette and what he's going to command. Is he going to command the money that Jim Bowden put out there, who I don't trust as far as I can throw him, but Jim Bowden thinks he's going to get, $190 million over 9 years or whatever it was. Do I think that, Bo Bichette is worth that contract at the age that he's at, as opposed to just seeing what I have in, say, Jet Williams while keeping Beatty and using that money to get a different player and going to get Dylan Cease and then trading for someone else. Like I think it's dependent on whoever it is that we're talking about, but you're not wrong in the overall idea of it. I just think that it's always going to come down to, is this player viewed as a proper fit for where this team is going? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the reason why I brought up Bichette, and I don't want to get hung up on it like he's the guy I have identified and da-da-da-da.
But no, that's the example.
Well, because here's the thing, right? Because Bregman's older. Bichette is 27. Bichette is a very good hitter. He's not the best defender at shortstop, wouldn't be the shortstop here. He's either going to play second or maybe third base if he was to come to the Mets, right? So I guess what I start to do is I start to look at where you spend the money, Ibby. So like, yeah, okay. Armand says Jim Bowden said 7,189 for Bo Bichette.
Right.
Now, let me ask you this. Would it be smarter to sign Bo Bichette to play third base, which means, Beatty either plays second or you trade him or whatever, right? Whatever. To 7,189 at 27 years old instead of signing Pete Alonso? Because now you have 27-year-old Bo Bichette, 27-year-old Juan Soto. You have the elder statesmen with Nimmo and Lindor, who are, in their prime, but older than those guys. You're not recommitting to Alonso. You're getting better defensively. You see the kind of math I'm doing here? It's not about, oh, Bo Bichette's a name and John doesn't like Brett Beatty. In this situation, Beatty could stay and Bo Bichette can play second base. And then you figure out what goes on in the outfield with Jet Williams and Carson Bench, provided you don't trade one of them. Or if Bichette is a better third baseman, he plays third and Beatty could play second base. To me, you make a move like that, you get younger and more athletic. You've spent your money on something that is not Pete Alonso. And I love Pete. But Pete Alonso has his defensive deficiencies. He's probably going to be a DH. You're going to have to give, you're giving Pete Alonso not that exact deal, but you're giving Pete Alonso this kind of money, right? You're not signing Pete Alonso for 7 years and he's not getting $189 million, but he might get $150. So I don't know. Would I rather sign Bo Bichette to I don't think Bo's going to get this deal, but I would rather, sign Bo Bichette 7,189, say you're going to either play second or third, not sign Pete, figure out first base in a different way. Maybe that means Josh Naylor on a shorter deal. That's how I'm doing this. And I think that's what makes the Mets a better team, younger, more athletic, defense. I don't know. To me, that's where my mind goes, because it's age, it's defense, it's a known commodity. Now, if you want to do that and you want to sign Pete too, it's not my money. I don't care. But I just think that there are ways for the Mets to use money, to use prospects, and not just in the way of you trade Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams plus one of this guy and one of those guys, and you get a starting pitcher, and then Brett Beatty's your third baseman, and then you go and you get a second baseman who could piece it together for a little bit, and you see what Ronnie Mauricio I don't want to do that. I want to be creative and I want to be proactive. That's my thing.
Sorry, I keep on coming in and out, so if I break out again. No, I think I don't think that you're wrong in that sense. And I'm just looking at some of the chat as well about how people.
Yeah, you are freezing up.
Am I here?
Yeah.
I know it's getting rough over here. It's getting rough. Can you hear me or no?
Yeah, you're good.
Nothing. I'm having
You're good.
a hard time on my end. Hello?
Yeah, you're here, man.
Oh,
Go for it.
okay. I'm having a hard time hearing you on mine, so that's why I figure I'm breaking up as well. So now I'm losing my following along with the chat. You're not wrong in what you're saying in terms of what Stearns ended the year on, saying how things have to get better. There's a lot of changeover that has to happen with this roster if you want to attain the things that you're saying that you need help in: run prevention, bettering yourself, and situational stuff. So there are definitely ways that can be attained, but you got to do things that might make certain people uncomfortable. And I know a lot of people are comfortable with the idea of Pete here, but as John's saying also, there's a world where Pete is not here and you're trying to figure out things another way. And I know it might have been Joel Sherman who mentioned this. It's like, you look at other teams that have done stuff like this and they've lost a player before, if that's the case with Pete, where you're so used to the entire situation that the team is, but once they left, the team actually got, it's Harper with the Nat. It's situations like that where you can see a team do better because they were able to better purpose or I should say, how the team is made up, because
It'd be really struggling, but we got the idea of what he's saying. All I'm saying is, I guess, what Carson said earlier, which is be fluid, but also don't be attached to anybody. I love Pete. Pete is the only current Met whose jersey I have. It's not about no to Pete. Like, that's what people keep losing. Like, it's like, we're criticizing Stearns and they're like, oh, you're not criticizing Stearns. It's like, I'm saying, oh, I think I'd rather get younger in a spot and be more athletic and be a more well-rounded team. And then people are like, oh, you're going to miss Pete when, like the next guy's hitting 23 home runs. Like, it's not, it's Ken, 250 with 23 home runs. I've already said it's so hard to replace the numbers that Pete gives you, because you can't just wake up and sign up for 30, 35 home runs on a great year, 40 home runs. And like, yes, Pete is very valuable, but if you start to look around the league, there are ways where you're trying to do better and reshape your team. And, again, I just use free agents. I'm not even talking about trades. I'm not even talking about either one of the Japanese players, Murakami or Okamoto, because I don't know enough about them, because I don't follow Japanese baseball like that. But like, I don't know, there's a world where the Mets pay big money for a starting pitcher in free agency, or like, let's say where the Mets sign a guy like Michael King or whatever, and then trade for an ace and pair King with the ace that they trade for. And then rather than re-sign Pete, giving lesser deals to Bo Bichette and Josh Naylor, who are 27, 28 years old, makes you a better team. So I just think people need to be more open to the concept of trading. And I don't mean literally trading, but in some cases I do. Like, you can trade Brett Beatty in the right move. You can trade Mark Vientos in the right move. You could trade a prospect that you love, whether it's Carson Benz or Jet Williams, in the right move. You could also trade, and I mean swap out players who are on your roster for other players that might make you better. And spreading the money around to Naylor and somebody else might be better than keeping Pete. And I love Pete. It might make you better. Trading David Peterson might make you better. Trading Kodai Senga might make you better. And I know people like, I'll trade. Like, people always want to trade. They want to trade the people who weren't good.
Right.
Half the fan base didn't care if Pete Alonso walked last year. Now they're like, Pete Alonso will, when I was like, you shouldn't let Pete Alonso walk. And now people are like, you can't let Pete Alonso walk because he had a good year. People are like, oh, I love Kodai Senga, Ghost Fork. He's the best. You can't do anything. You got to keep him. And now he had a bad year. And they're like, yeah, I'd trade Kodai Senga. You have to, it's not about good year, bad year. It's about how your team is constructed. And you need to not be so attached to certain guys. And Pete's a tough one. Pete's very easy to be attached to, and you should be attached to him. But man, I don't know, dude. I just think people need, I'll give you one last word on this because I know we have to go and I know your Wi-Fi is struggling, but
Yeah.
I just think you need to be fluid, like Carson said, and you can't be attached to everybody, like Carson said.
If you
That's the
want to
bottom
have,
line.
if you want to have better results and you're upset with how things have been going, you should be ready for drastic changes because clearly what's been going on isn't good enough. And if that's the route that's chosen, don't be upset if Pete's not back, because you might say now, like in a vacuum, like right now, you could say, well, and I know Keith Hernandez just said it too on SNY, like, how the hell are you going to replace 125 RBIs? Well, when he walks out the door, if that's what ends up happening in this situation, we're going to find out how they plan on bettering themselves, because they know that they have to replace that production. That's the plan going in. Like, what's the plan in terms of how you're going to do it? You got to allow it to play out and then see if it actually works, because you're a fan of the team. You got to see if it's actually going to work, because Pete's been here since 2019 and we haven't won anything. So again, it's not, I understand the player's great. I understand that the player is homegrown and what he's done for this team is special in terms of statistics and power. And you need something like that in a lineup to succeed. But if you want more and you want change and you want to be better overall, could be a part that ends up getting cut out because of, the inability to move other pieces. Is that Pete's fault? No, it's not. And we're going to continue talking about this for the entire offseason until there's an actual solution to it. It's going to be a fascinating watch for sure. But yeah, you got to allow it to play out. And to John's point, sometimes you got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, because if you want change, that's the only way that you're going to get it.
I'm going to use this new commenter, I believe is new. And if you are, welcome to the show. They've been firing off a lot of comments that I agree with. And I'm going to use this to kind of close things out because I want to highlight a new commenter who's just joining us for the first time. And it is Josh, who says, I'm not turning on him when he's good. I'm trying not to sign a bad deal for a player who may or may not regress. You do realize this isn't about 1 year, right? It's about 4 to 7. Not wanting him back doesn't mean I hate him. It means I want this team to have a safer future. That's all. Can't be attached. Like, that's what I'm trying to say. That is exactly in a nutshell what I'm trying to say. And I think Josh came in a little bit after I kind of preached this thought process of being more proactive and more creative and using every asset at your disposal. But if I could leave everybody who's here watching us with one comment right now, it's that I want to see the Mets. I think the criticism of David Stearns is in a lot of cases too far. I think that you can criticize his lack of urgency at times this past season. And that's why I want to see more proactivity. I want to see a little bit more urgency, and I want to see this team because I think they are so poised. To Joe DeMayo's comment earlier, the Mets are one of the most attractive teams to deal with. They have a top 5 and in some cases a best farm system in baseball. They have young, valuable talent on their major league roster. So I want to see the Mets use all of their assets at their disposal right now, knowing that they have Juan Soto at 27 years old to build around. And they have other good pieces too, but I want to see them use all of those assets, the money, the position, the prospects, whether that's in a deal or being aggressive on calling them up and saying this person's ready. Let's make that move. Let's have Carson Bench be our center fielder or whatever. And I want to see them use those prospects and some of those major league talent in deals. And I need to see them identify outside of the organization somebody who maybe is being undervalued, because that is low key a very important thing of the quote unquote Dodger model that they have done, not just while this window has been open, but they have done long term. They did it with Justin Turner. They did it with Chris Taylor. They did it with Max Muncy. They continue to do it. They find Tommy Edman. They go out, they get these guys, they identify them. They're maybe not superstars. Justin Turner kind of became a superstar, but the other guys lesser than that. And they're just quality ball players. Use everything at your disposal. That's what I want to see. Shout out to everybody who was here. Thanks for dealing with some of the Wi-Fi issues that we had. It's all good. It happens sometimes.
Sorry,
2
guys.
hours of Mets talk. It happens. Maybe it's not a big deal. 2 hours of Mets talk. We'll be back next week in our regularly scheduled time. If you're new, like Josh, shout out to him. And I think Radiant is a new commenter. Maybe not brand new, but new-ish. So shout out to all the people who have been here for a long time. Shout out to the folks who are new. We do this show basically every Wednesday. Every once in a while, we have time off, but right now we're in the thick of it. Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Ibby is on vacation next week. I will be here, likely with a guest co-host, to be determined who that is. Appreciate all the love. Mr. Nobody saying great show as always. Later. I'm John. Yes. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video. If you missed any of the show, you can go back and you can watch it on this YouTube channel. You can follow us across social media at Til Mets Do Us Part. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Substack. We're on all those places. You can go back and watch anything you missed. And also, this will drop as an audio podcast later on today. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Apple Music. So however you choose to ingest the content that we put out here at Til Mets Do Us Part, you can find us across the internet. That's it for now. I'll be back next week. Ibby, enjoy your vacation. Try to get your Wi-Fi on vacation too. Maybe they need a little bit of a break. I'm John, that's Ibby. This is Til Mets Do Us Part. We'll see you next week. Peace.